Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Uno 5.1 Twitch stream, and we're on LinkedIn and we're on X as well and YouTube. So welcome, friends, and let's talk about Uno Platform 5.1. So to join me today, we have Steve and Martin from the Uno team, engineering, and we're going to be talking about all the new things that we released in this Uno 5.1 release. So let's start with today. So if you haven't read the blog post, of course, we're going to be diving into the Live Wizard, which is the newer feature that we've released, which is the ability to have the ability to create projects directly from if you're running VS Code or Writer, and being able to create your application directly. Like if you were to do it with the Uno Platform Wizard, but directly from the web. So if you're on Linux or you're on Mac OS or you're on Writer, but you don't have Visual Studio, you're going to be able to create those new templates. So to get there, the best way is to go directly to our new URL, which is the new.platform.uno, and you'll notice that you're greeted with a new Uno Platform. A new platform wizard, which doesn't look like the original one, but if you type in your new project name, then you can say test project, then click start, and then you're going to get greeted with the same experience that you get when you're in Visual Studio. So just to show you what that was, if you're clicking create on your new project, you're going to be able to see the exact same thing. So you can see here that the visual aspect of the wizard from Visual Studio is really the same, and there's one good reason for this. It's because it's a WinUI app, and we're running the same code on the web as we are running it on the desktop using our wizard from Visual Studio. So that's why it looks the same. And so what that means is that if you're in Writer or VS Code, you're going to be able to choose your options. So let's say I want to create my blank application. You can choose between all those targets, iOS, Android, web, GTK, WPF, and Linux frame buffer, the same thing that you would do in the other target. Then you can choose your presentation using MVVM or MVUX. Your markup, you can use C# markup or XAML. If you're new to Uno Platform, you should know that we have the option to do C# directly without doing any XAML. That's something that a lot of people have asked us about. You can, of course, use all the material and Fluent themes, the extensions. So, if you want your application to use dependency injection, all the pieces that we're providing as part of the Uno extensions to now allow you to make your application to create your application faster, and hit the road going without having to deal with all the new feature, all the features that you have to add to your application. You have to understand everything that needs to be added to your application. We also have the toolkit, for which Steve is going to be presenting a new interesting feature. We also have .NET MAUI embedding. That's something that a lot of people wanted to use to be able to import their controls and run them into their mobile apps, and a few other pieces. And we also have the PWA support. And that one, I wanted to particularly put a line on that one. You may see that at the top of my browser, you have the app available icon. And if you press that app available icon and click install, then my application is going to be available as a dockable and pinnable taskbar item. It's just something that is available on all targets. It's available on Linux. It's available on Mac OS as well. And then what that means is that if you pin it to taskbar here, your application is going to be so yes, I want to pin it, and then the application is available directly. And then if you want to create a new application, then you click on that button directly, and will open directly as if it were a standard application. Next is all the pieces that we're providing, testing with UI testing, and then finally all the CI pipelines that we're providing to build your application directly without having to fill it around with all the intricacies of GitHub Actions and Azure pipelines. And when you're done, you click create, and then you're going to get a command line that you can go directly and type into your command prompt and go into your your own folder, then press enter. It will run the .NET New Uno app with all the pieces that are needed there, and there you have it. You're going to have your application ready to go and ready to develop. So that's the Uno platform template wizard. And when I was saying that it was an actual application, so you can see that it was there. It's now in my taskbar, and if I click it again, it will just open quickly so that you can create all your new applications using Uno platform. So that's the cool thing. So one thing to know is that this is an application that's it's a web app, it's a live app, it's just standalone, and we're working on adding some new features onto it. And if you have any feedback on the use of the live wizard, like for instance, you would want to have it included directly into Writer maybe, or if you wanted it to be running directly in VS Code, so that's something that we're thinking about. But if you have any kind of feedback, that would be great, so that we can prioritize that work. So that's it. That's the live wizard. So let us know what you think, and for all the VS Code and Writer users. So that's it for the live wizard. Now we're going to talk about the TimePicker control, and Martin is here to talk to us about it. Go ahead, Martin. So you're muted. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerome. So I already opened Playground, our playground.platform.uno website, where we can show you actually the new control in action. And you can even browse there and choose the snippets to see the TimePicker in action on your browser or your device. We actually had TimePicker before, but it was specific for mobile devices, so Android and iOS. And we were missing this kind of crucial control on Skia and WebAssembly, which was not great. But now finally, we have the control ported and have it available in Uno platform. And the reason it took so long is that Microsoft hasn't open sourced TimePicker along with the rest of WinUI code base. And that happened a few months ago. So we immediately started porting the control, and now it's available in Uno as well. So I have the simple sample here when we have 4 type pickers with some additional properties. And what you can see, if I click the time picker, I can pick the time from the selection, and you can pick in different formats even. So you can have a 24-hour clock or 12-hour clock with AM and PM. And it handles all those specificities of regions and time zones and so on. So you can just plug it in, and it will take care of all that is complex about picking time and things that you want to skip doing yourself. So that's pretty great. And as I mentioned, because it's based on Microsoft's implementation, we were actually able to take the whole implementation from them and port it from C++ to C#. So I can actually show you this. I have the TimePicker from Microsoft's code base in C++. So this is the C++ version. And what we did is with a semi-automated process, we translated that into C#, which is on the right. So this is our code base, but you can see it's the same thing basically, just translated into another programming language. But the great thing is that we can now stay on top of Microsoft's updates. So if they add a new feature or update something, we can just bring in the changes, and we will be all aligned with Microsoft's latest and greatest implementation. And that's definitely beneficial for a control that's this complex. This is actually just one part of the code, and it's 1,600 lines of code. And this is just the TimePicker itself. It also contains TimePicker flyout and other things. So it's actually very complex. And if we were to implement it ourselves, it would take us a long time. So it's a great thing that Microsoft has open sourced it. And this way they helped us with the implementation just by having the ability to translate it to C#. And one more thing, we actually are able to port the integration and automation tests. So we ported those. So we are sure that if there are further changes or fixes, that we don't regress anything. So that's also a great thing. So I think that's mostly it. But just to mention, on mobile devices, you can still use the platform-specific native implementation. So I have this TimePicker and on Android. So if I prefer to use the native TimePicker on Android, I can still use it. So it's built in. So you can pick and choose if you prefer the shared WinUI-based implementation or the native implementation that comes from Android and iOS. So yeah, I think that's it from me. So I will give it back to Jerome.
Yeah, it's an amazing control. It's the sheer complexity of that control is quite amazing. Doing any kind of globalization of a control is extremely complex, and we can see all the pieces and management of local specific rules as integrated in those controls. So glad to be able to pick up that kind of code and benefit from the giant. So that's very nice. So there were a few questions about the Live Wizard. So the first one is, if I install the app, does it stay updated automatically? So yes, it will, because it's a PWA. It will automatically get the latest when you're running it. So it will automatically pick up the changes. So you don't need to do anything. So what you're basically pinning is the you're basically pinning the link to the website, if you will, but it's just running inside of a shell that looks like an app. So it's pretty much what that is. So it will pick up the changes immediately. There's also a way to make it run offline, but give it a try and let us know if that works for you. So next is so we worked on a few performance improvements. Particularly shaving memory. So if you were running on Uno 5.0, now if you're moving to 5.1, you may see reduction in memory usage, creating controls. So give it a try. If you have a memory hungry application, it will probably be of interest to you to have that kind of updates. Next is the MS Build SDK that we've introduced. So we're on a quest to reduce the size of the projects, and you've probably been noticing that we have a lot of projects when you're creating a new application, and particularly if you have a lot of targets, and if you want to support everything, you're going to see that you have a lot of projects that are in your solution. But more specifically than that, the fact that there are multiple projects, those projects are pretty large. So let's say if I go create a basic project like this, and I select all the targets, you're going to see that when we were creating a project before, there were a lot of content that was included. And what we did basically, and this is a screenshot of this, is that we had, for a project library, we had all of this code that was the configuration that was in the project file, and now we only have this content in the project file. So that makes it quite interesting to look at, and less package references, less workarounds, and things like that. Everything's included automatically. So one of the pieces that we changed is the use of what are called MS Build SDKs, and at the top you're going to see. Let me give some real estate here. You're going to see that we added something that's called the Project SDK. So previously you were seeing Microsoft Net SDK. Now this is the Uno SDK. It kind of allows us to create defaults that make sense for those projects that fit all the targets that we want to target. So without you having to deal with all the details, having all the group includes like content page, compile, and things like that. All of that is included directly in the SDK. You don't have to deal with all those pieces. Same thing with the mobile, even though that one's still a bit big, but we're working on it. We're probably going to be reducing some more. You can see that there are some issues that have been created for Xamarin and .NET now that may have been fixed or may not, depending on the version that you're using. So we're going to trim it all down in the future versions. So stay tuned for this. But we're trying to remove all the fat, if you will, so that it gets leaner and easier to understand when you're going into a new project. We're trying to get to something that looks like this, very small, and very easy to understand. Same thing with the directory build props. That file was very, very large, and now it defines only the defaults. All those defaults that you can change. If you want to change other types of version, default version, app names, and things like that, all of that can be changed. If you want to reset those values, you can, but by default they're already removed. So, and the directory build targets, which was quite plenty, quite full previously, is essentially gone now. So that's with the support for directory for the Uno SDK. And one last thing that we changed also, and that's the support for the Uno version piece here, which allows you to just have access to one file. And let me just add one file because it seems it's missing here. Now the version of Uno is defined as part of the global JSON. So you can see here that if you want to change the version, you just change that number here to something else. And what that will do is that in the package directory package prop, so where you define all your package versions, all the Uno packages that are part of the Uno core, so the Uno UI pieces, automatically version like this. So if you want to change those numbers, you want to go into the global JSON and change it from there. So that's what we have for the MS Build SDK. And let's go and continue over. So let's see if we have a few questions. We had a question from Catalyst. Let's see. So that question is there a plan to include support for Mac OS and not Catalyst? So yes, there is. And we're supporting Catalyst in kind of three ways. The first one is AppKit. That AppKit is not well supported by Microsoft at that point, mainly because MAUI does not support it directly. So Microsoft, the .NET team is building for it, but there are gaps in the tooling, so we're not completely supporting it. So that's why it's not present in the wizard. The second one is Catalyst. Catalyst is basically taking an iOS app and making run on Mac OS. Kind of works great, but you may not have access to all the APIs that are provided by the rest of the platform, and it's sandboxed, so we may not have access to everything. And the last one is being able to run through the Skia target. So currently it's the Skia GTK head. So you can run that one. It's a standard .NET app, which has a UI, so you can run it that way. So macOS is there. It's just a matter of choosing the right target. And if you have questions about our support and how to choose those, please open a discussion directly in the Uno repository, and we'll answer that. And the second question from the same person, from Daweed, which is better to develop Uno apps, VS 2022 or VS Code? Both are great. They're both providing a lot of features. You have the ecosystem VS Code that's already there. You have the .NET support that was there since a very long time. That's provided by Visual Studio. Hot reload's available on both targets. Mobile access is available on both targets. The only big difference that you have when you're running with VS 2022 and VS Code is the fact that you can run on Mac OS and Linux. So depending on the targets that you're developing on, not for, but developing on, you may want to choose either one. So let us know what you choose, and if there are anything that are missing from those. I forgot about the new template that we've created with using the new MS Build SDK. This is entirely optional. If you have an existing project that's not using the Uno SDK, you do not need to upgrade. You can stay on your existing project and project structure. It will continue to work. We're making sure that there's no breaking change of any kind that will be introduced when we're going to Uno SDK. And now we're going to talk about the Uno Toolkit updates. So, Steve, what's new? What's new in the Uno Toolkit updates?
Yeah. So hello. So the big thing that's new as part of the Uno Toolkit library is our attack on allowing you to create responsive applications. So changing a UI based on size of the screen, size of the window, size of the device, all that fun stuff. So obviously, depending on which platforms you're running on, the size of your actual window can change as your app is running. And so we could take a look at an example of this. So I just have a small example of an Uno app running for WebAssembly in the browser. And so I want to have it change color and change the name of, the mode that I'm in, if you will. So narrow, normal, wide, widest, right? So and it's adapting like this. So how you would have normally done this, or how you do this now out of the box without any changes, just from core WinUI APIs that runs across all the platforms and works perfectly, is to use these visual state triggers using the adaptive triggers, right? So if we're looking at the XAML for the page that we just saw, if I scroll down here, the UI right here is just our grid that we have to give a name and our text block that we give a name to, right? You have to define this giant block of code here for your visual state groups. And so you each have one, for an adaptive trigger here, an adaptive trigger here, an adaptive trigger here. You hard code your min window height, min window width, and you change your background to whether you want it to be green, whether you want it to be blue, whether you want it to be purple, and you have setters for each thing. So it's very verbose. It works well. It's very verbose and adds a lot of complexity to the top of your code. So if we wanted to change this and have this use the new toolkit stuff that we're introducing, I'm just going to switch my branch, and this exact same logic and functionality will happen. Now, instead of using visual states, let's go to the responsive markup branch. And so we'll see it's a little long because of the binding here, but this is the exact same code, the exact same application, I should say, for our functionality, and I'll build it as I'm talking about it. But what we're looking at here is that same grid and that same text block, but now that background is using the responsive markup extensions. So a special binding expression that you can use to say, I want the value of background to be green when we're in narrow, normal when we're in blue, purple when we're in wide, and same thing in terms of the text, right? Narrow, normal, wide, I wanted to give it these values here. And so these values that we're looking at, this narrow, this normal, this wide, and there's more values that are available to you. These are all, they come, yes, with default breakpoint values available for you, right? So that's available in the documentation. So at certain pixel breakpoints, they'll go, but these are all overridable at any scope that you'd like. So within the responsive, within each responsive binding expression themselves, you can override which breakpoint values they use. The page scope within the scope of the grid, within the scope of the application itself, are all overridable and will cascade down and pick and resolve to the proper resolution logic, right? So we can look, that app has now built. So that same app that we were looking at before is now, doing the same exact thing as we were, but now using our responsive markup extensions to greatly simplify your XAML and get rid of that giant block. So you have no visual states in this case at all. And the other option, so these are the responsive markup extensions here, like I mentioned. The other option, if you want to have some larger, more architectural changes to your layout, would be to use this new responsive view control, right? So this, I switched branches now, so we're now in a different branch, but for the same application. And so what you'll see here is we have this responsive view control. And so we're a little bit more verbose. We're going back to having a little bit more XAML, but we get a lot more out of it, right? So here you're actually able to define your UI. I'm just going to get rid of the little menu there. You're able to define your UI multiple times, but however you'd like for each individual breakpoint, right? So for in wide, for normal, or for narrow. Now for this case, it's sort of a simplistic example, so we don't need to have a full-on new UI for each breakpoint. This is just for our example, but this is going to be following the case where you have large architectural or UI layout changes between your application when you make it wider or larger. Whether you want to re-architect, you have different values, different structure of your layouts. It could change drastically, right? So this is how this would work. And if we were to run this again, and again, this is using the same, so the resolution for normal, for wide is using the same resolution logic as the responsive markup extensions. So it's sharing the logic And again, you can override these values using the same way you would for the responsive markup extensions, which is detailed in the docs for how to override those values. And so this app, again, nothing really exciting, but the same thing is happening as we are switching between these templates for your wide and narrow states. And you could do really cool stuff. So that's responsive view and that's responsive markup extension. Just for fun, we could do fun things like this, right? So using these markup extensions are very, very powerful. So you can do cool things like what we're looking at here is actually the same UI as before. We have our grid and we have our text block, but I just added another UI component here and some resources up here, right? So I have some different rotate transforms that I want to have. And I can actually use the responsive extensions. I can actually use the responsive extensions to set those static resources onto my render transform of my image using static resource bindings here within the responsive binding, right? So you can sort of Russian nesting doll egg things within here, and you can get some really cool stuff going on. So if I were to run this, and we could just take a look, I'll scroll along because it's long, but you see we have our normal, our wide, we have different widest rotation, wide rotation, and they're set to all of these static resources here. And so then if we were to look, I'll resize this back to normal. We'll let it load. We have this image that I found of this like really handsome, I don't know, I just found it on the internet. But as you were to go, you'd see it rotating around like just for fun. And this is all just, there's no animations here. There's just setting different render transforms using the markup extensions based on the visual breakpoints that you have for your window width. So some really powerful stuff, some really cool stuff. This is just a stupid little example, but I'd love to, they're very powerful. So we'd love to see what you guys, or what you can all create with this, and yeah, show us what you can do with it. So go check out the docs on the toolkit docs. There's a lot more to it. Yeah, there's a lot more to it, a lot more explanation, a lot more examples on the documentation. So dig into it and yeah, show us what you can make with it. Back to you, Jerome.
Very nice. So there were a few questions. The first one would be, so this one. So is a data template for each width required? What happens if I leave out the wide template?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I actually did leave out the some of the templates there. So yes, and the resolution logic is all explained within. There's a resolution logics section in the documentation. But yes, they do fall back onto whichever resolves best to the current layout of the window, right? So if there's if you're in the wide mode, but you only define a narrow template, it'll resolve back to whichever one's closest in terms of the width of the window and makes most sense, right? So so it'll sort of interpolate and assume which template should be created first. And it always, I believe, makes sure it falls back to the smallest size. Yeah. So none of the templates or none of the values for the responsive markup extension are required. So you don't need to do each and every step.
Very nice. There's a second one. That's can the transformation be animated?
The transformations. So like the render transforms here. So the responsive markup extensions can be placed only on dependency properties of a UI element. So it is, there are some caveats with it. So if I were to say create the render transform like this, like the image.render transform, blah, 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 and I create a rotate transform here, I wouldn't be able to use the markup extensions in that case because it's not a UI element that you're actually putting it on. I'm not sure if that's answering the question, but in terms of animating it, I'm assuming, yes, it could be done in any way because the resolution logic should take place first and then the animations can do what they want with it. But I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Looks like Jason's saying okay. Great. So let's see. We had a few other questions before. So the next one would be, Question talking about the desktop app. What are the difference between Uno WinUI and Uno GTK? So it depends on where you're running it. Uno WinUI and Uno GTK. So when we're talking about, when we say Uno WinUI, let's say we would say mostly Uno WinApp SDK. WinApp SDK would say. So WinApp SDK would be the Windows head that's running on Windows directly, and Uno GTK is also another head that runs the Uno code base, but can run also on Windows. So you can run on Windows in 2 ways. Actually 3 ways, because you can run using WPF as well for now. So that's what it is. And the main difference between the two is one that runs using the Microsoft WinUI code base, and the other one's running using the Uno code base. That's pretty much what we're looking at. So obviously the WinUI code base is complete in a sense that it implements everything that it's advertising, and we're catching up with adding more and more features like the TimePicker that we added for this release. So if you find anything that's still missing that you need support for, let us know by opening an issue. Hawkster was asking, is this issue still there when adding new XAML views where it adds the file to the shared CSproj? I have to go and manually delete these. So we're not using shared project anymore. It's a main standard project. If you go into a project like this, this is the standard project. There's no specifics here. So if you add a file, it will be there and it will not be duplicated in any way. So it's just going to be added there. So if you find anything like this, could be Visual Studio related. So let us know if you encounter that particular issue. I mean, it's not been there since Microsoft introduced the SDK support for the default globbing, but who knows? Maybe you found a way to reproduce it, and we can open a bug on the Microsoft side. Were there any other question? So I think that's it. So we can continue. So there were a few updates in Uno extensions. So we've moved over to .NET 8 to support MAUI extensions completely. So that's particularly important. So if you were using .NET 7, just make sure to move to .NET 8 if you want to use the latest version of Uno extensions. We have a documentation that allows for all of this. Also know that .NET 8.101 is not completely supported at this time. We're waiting for Microsoft to release an update, whether it's 8.0.200 or 102. So we'll see. So if you're having issues with this, just make sure to follow the discussion that was mentioned here. We're adding workarounds on how to make sure that you're in a stable place, particularly using 8.0.100 and not the one that is failing. Eduardo has a question. So the question is there a way to have navigation transition, or can it only be done through platform-specific code? So it depends. It depends on the target. There are animations that you can have using the transition directly in the frame. You can You can have animations directly on content controls. You can have many pieces that are integrated directly in the frame. There are native portions of it. So if you're using the native frame presenter on iOS, for instance, there are already navigation animations. On Android, it's pretty much the same. So it depends on the target. If you find location where you want to have animations, it's too difficult, let us know by opening a discussion so that we can guide you through and try to find open issues or point you to the places where that is implemented. There's another question with the relative panel. Has it been open source? I think we're already using the open source version of the relative
we are
panel,
using
Martin.
we have used the WinUI source to port it, so it's exact match with WinUI. So we have exactly the same implementation with all the tests and everything. So it should be all covered.
So Jason, if you find anything that is not working properly, a behavior that's not the same, maybe it's because we maybe are not exactly aligned with the latest version that's in the WinUI source. That could be. So let us know if you find anything that doesn't work there. I think McNetz has joined. McNetz is a very regular listener of my Twitch streams on the Tuesdays. So thanks for joining. So finally, we've started to do something additional to provide ways to help developers use the Uno platform and show small pieces of features that may have been there for a really long time, or we've released recently, or just to explain a bit more specifics. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you're going to find all sorts of small videos about styling, about switching light and dark themes, about C# markup and the wizard and other pieces like that. So it's 2 minutes, very easy. Well, actually more than 2 minutes for some, but it's a pretty small videos that explains in sometimes in detail, sometimes not, but covers large pieces of the content from Uno platform. So take a look and let us know if you find the concept interesting. If you want to see TikToks about this, who knows? There's so many things that may be of interest there. And of course, our new Discord server. So we've created our new Discord server to centralize all the discussions that were happening around the community, so that to make sure that we can follow everything that's happening. So if you were on the previous places that we were, you can migrate over to our new Discord channel, and there's quite a bit of activity recently. So it's always fun to see the community join up and answer questions and participate. So thank you to everyone that has joined already, and if you haven't, join the fun and go to our URL at the top, so platform.uno/Uno Discord, and join us for the Uno fun. And that's it. So thank you for having listened to all of those new 5.1 features, and thank you, Steve and Martin, for showing up all those cool new features. And I hope you give it a try and let us know what you've experimented with, and continue to use Uno. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.